WatchCharts is the world's leading secondary watch market research platform. Dive into the data yourself at WatchCharts.com. The secondary watch market can be an interesting place because the weirdest seeming things can sometimes command the craziest premiums. When it comes to dials, what are those premiums? What differs between the dials to make the more expensive version cost that much more? And have the premiums always been as high as they seem today? We'll use several examples to illustrate the trend and then share some data on how these watches have performed in the market over time. And as always, we welcome you to check out these watches and the rest of the data for yourself at WatchCharts.com. Let us know in the comments if there are other watches you'd like us to cover. We'll kick things off with a watch that's widely known and quite popular, the Rolex Oyster Perpetual, both in 36 and in 41 millimeters. It comes in a variety of different dial colors. Some are finished in a sunburst, sort of glossy finish, and then the colored ones are all sort of in a matte grain textured finish. And these are some of the most basic watches that, if not the most basic watch that Rolex makes, time only, available in two different sizes. The dial is the only thing that really you get to see any sort of customization around, because the rest of the watch is stock standard and identical in every other way. So you get a very good movement, a very good case, a very good bracelet, and then just a different colored dial. So what we don't know and can speculate on only to some degree without having access to actual data from Rolex is how many they make relative to each variant. So we don't know, for example, if they make 10 of each or 20 of each, or for the standard colors, they make them 3 times as many as the colored variants. But what we can talk about is the market prices for both variants at the 36 millimeter and the 41 millimeter size. So the bar chart here shows what the prices for both sizes for each of the different colors are today. The retail price, which is the bar on the leftmost side of the chart, is $6,400, which is a retail value for the 41 millimeter version, and that's sort of plotted across just to give a sense of reference. And what you'll see is that even with just this one variant about the dial, that's the only thing that varies between these watches, is the color of the dial. Every single one of these watches on the secondary market trades above the retail value, not just for the 36 millimeter, but even the 41 millimeter version. The lowest premium is on a black dial, 36 millimeters. That's about 16%. And that's basically going to be a little bit of a premium over having to pay sales tax in the US. And then the highest premium with a market price of $22,900 is the 41 millimeter turquoise dial, at which point you're paying more than 3.5 times what this watch is worth at retail. The other interesting sort of thing to point out on this chart is that both coral and yellow are both discontinued references, and they're only beaten by the turquoise itself. So if for a moment we set aside the question of how many of each of these variants Rolex makes, and then how many of those end up on the secondary market, just look at whether one of these is more desirable than the other on the basis of the color itself. It's an entirely subjective opinion. And so depending on popular demand, why the turquoise one commands so much higher of a premium than, for example, the blue or the pink or the green is not immediately obvious, other than to start looking at things like the context in which this watch exists, which is the obsession around the Tiffany Nautilus and sort of Tiffany blue being just a trend that Rolex seemed to kick off. And so then, because this is seen as the progenitor of that trend, it becomes desirable for that reason, and then everybody starts wanting one. And so, the market price sort of jumps as a consequence of that. That being said, if I just revisit the assumption that I mentioned earlier, which is that an equal number of these watches is available, that's useful sort of as a starting point to understand what some of these other causes might be. But of course, as we know from observing the market and just looking at the absolute number of listings, not each of these watches is equally available. And so the market prices that you see here are not just a reflection of desirability, but also just, rarity and how many examples are available. We'll stick with Rolex, but switch price points completely and talk about the GMT Master II reference 126719 BLRO. This is available at retail with two different dial variants, one with a meteorite dial and one with a matte blue dial, both of which go for $42,900 and $40,600 respectively. The meteorite dial has a current premium over retail of 34% with a market price of $57,500, and the plain Jane blue dial is basically trading right around retail plus tax. So it's basically what you pay for it out the door is likely what you'll have to pay for it on the secondary market. What's interesting is that even though the Rolex factory premium for the meteorite dial is about $2,300, what the market says that dial is worth is 7 times more. Because of if you compare the differences between the market prices. And there is certainly some truth here to the fact that the meteorite dial is more rare because they are just by the nature of the material itself going to be more limited in production and availability. The fact that you can essentially command an over $15,000 premium just for a change in the dial is wild, not just at at the level of a watch that retails for $6,100 or $6,400, but even for something that retails for over $40,000. And then a slight variation on the theme of the dial color is the bezel color. And so the Rolex Submariner 126610 LN and LV, the black bezel and the green ceramic bezel, also exhibit the same delta, where the non-standard or the non-sort of conventional color commands a greater premium. This is an example more of a watch which is more expensive despite not being significantly rarer. Again, we don't know how many of each of these are made, but there are enough out there on the market at this point that supply does not seem to be the issue. It's more just a question of how many people want them and are willing to pay a premium for them. And then, of course, with the 116500, the previous generation Cosmograph Daytona, there's always been a delta in the market prices for the white dial and the black dial steel versions of this watch. This is another one where the watches are distinguished literally just by the color of their dial, not necessarily by availability or rarity. It's just purely a question of which one more people want. Of course, if we're talking about stainless steel sports watches, we have to talk about watches from the Holy Trinity as well. The Vacheron Constantin overseas reference 4500V/110A-B 126, 128, 483, and 146. Those are the 4 dial variations of this watch in silver or white, blue, black, and then a brown version that was only available for a short period of time and has long since been discontinued. The first 3 dial variations are all available for the same amount of money at retail, and we see that the blue dial here commands a premium. I have had the opportunity to see some of these watches in person, and while each of them is beautiful in its own way, there's nothing that is outstandingly sort of distinguished about the blue dial over the black dial and the white dial that would make this sort of premium or over sort of the ones that don't cost as much make sense. And then again, these are watches where not necessarily there's a huge discrepancy in availability, but more so just that there's much higher demand for the blue watch. But the other interesting trend, just to point out with the brown watch in particular, with the brown dialed Vacheron in particular, is to look at the 3-year performance comparison of these 4 variations and notice that while the white, black, and blue exhibit this sort of rise and then correction trend over the last year, the brown dial has just quietly only ever trended up and is currently sitting at more than 100%, around 125% price appreciation over the last 3 years. That is more a reflection of its rarity than anything else. And then, of course, if we're talking about blue dialed sports watches from the Holy Trinity, we have to talk about the Nautilus 5711, but also here with its two variants with the white dial and the green dial. So the green dial is a special case. This one actually maxed out last year in August at around $500,000 in market price, whereas the blue dial variation has only ever gone up to about $180,000 in March 2022. The green dial is limited in production, so there are only so many out there. There's this whole sort of drama of a story or a narrative around the Nautilus coming to an end, and this is part of that conclusion story. And so for that reason as well, it's, it trades at a higher premium. But the blue dial and the white dial, which are more of a comparison where that sort of rarity or limited production is not an issue, you see that the delta between the dials is about $10,000. So there's still a premium on the blue dial, but nothing quite crazy like the green dial version has. We'll end with the Royal Oak, which in the 15500 ST, which is now a discontinued reference, was available in 4 different dial variations. Just for reference, the current retail value of the 15510 ST, which is a comparable in production reference, is around $27,800. So each of these watches, relative to what the comparable watch would cost to buy at retail today, trades at a premium, a considerable premium, almost close to 2x. Again, there's a sort of obvious hierarchy here in prices where the white dial and the black dial and the gray dial sort of are at one price level, which is around $42,000 to $44,000, and then the blue dial is just sort of sitting head and shoulders above that at over $53,000. So again, without knowing the exact production numbers, which just like Rolex, we also don't have for Patek or for AP, it's very difficult to say how much of the effect of this delta in price that we see between the dial colors is down to just rarity and how many are available compared to what the actual demand looks like. Would you pay the secondary market premium for a highly desirable dial? Is a meteorite dial, for example, worth the additional over $15,000 that you would have to pay for that watch? Or are you just okay with going home with a blue dial and saying, oh, I have a white gold GMT Master? That's pretty good. Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for listening.